Lesson 3, the distributive property. Might sound familiar to you from 6th grade. You did use it a little bit. I think mostly with positive numbers. I think today, looking ahead, we will have some positive and negative numbers. So today's aim is I can simplify expressions using the distributive property, which begins on page 75. So with the distributive property, you can see in example 1 and example 2, we use the arrows to indicate that we're distributing, and think about what distributing actually means. Distribute means to give out or hand out. So if you look at example 1, we are distributing the 3 to the x and we're distributing the 3 to the 4. What does that exactly mean? Well, if you look at the original problem, like we said in the last 2 units, when there's no operation, that means multiplication. So the 3 in front of the parentheses, there's nothing between the 3 and that first set of parentheses. So that 3 is being multiplied to everything in the inside of the parentheses. So when we draw the arrow, we are multiplying the 3 to the x and then the 3 to the 4. I cannot combine my terms when I'm done, so it stays as, in that case, 3x plus 12. I am not going to be showing this middle step today. I'm going to be going directly from the first step to the last step. I'm going to multiply when I draw the arrows. So example number 2, again, there's no operation between the -3 and the parentheses, so that means I'm taking that -3 and I'm multiplying it to everything in the inside of the parentheses. Once I multiply to everything inside the parentheses then drop off, just like in any other multiplication problem that you do. Negatives can be a little tricky. So we multiply the negative to the 3 to the x and we get -3x. And then we multiply the -3 to the +4 and we get -12. So since we're multiplying in today's lesson, we're going to be using our rules that we learned for multiplying and dividing integers, which was our tic-tac-toe board. So our plus signs go on the diagonal and our negatives go everywhere else. So when multiplying, you can actually type in -3 times 4, or I like to just do 3 times 4, which is 12, and then I know a negative times a positive gives me a negative, and that is why in our final answer here we have a -12. Let's go through some. I think it'll make more sense once we do some together and not ones that are already pre-done. So for the example section, it says to distribute. Distribute means to give out or to multiply to everything inside the parentheses. Let me see, how many? Let's do evens. So I'm going to take a look at problem number 2. That 3 is being multiplied to the 2x and to the -4. So again, just like in the last lesson, I said that you need to start getting in the mindset that your negatives are minus signs and your minus signs are negatives. So I'm going to take my 3 on the outside and multiply it to my 2x on the inside. Now, some of you might be thinking you can't do that because the 2 is an x and the 3 does not. We are not combining like terms here. We are not adding and subtracting. We are multiplying. So 3 times 2 you can do, which is 6. 3 times 2 is 6, but then that 2 had an x, so this is a 6x. So 3 times 2x would be 6x. Now you're going to distribute the 3 to the 4 as well, but in this case it's a -4 or a -4. So in your calculator, you can type in 3 times -4, or I like to just use my tic-tac-toe board and do the math. It's a little bit quicker than using the calculator. So I know 3 times 4 is 12, and a positive times a negative, using my tic-tac-toe board, is a negative. So I'm going to put a minus sign between those two terms because it's a -12. So my final answer is 6x minus 12. I cannot combine those together because they are not like terms. Problem number 4. I take the 2 on the outside and I multiply it to the 5x on the inside. 2 times 5 is 10, and I need that x. 2 times 7 is 14, but I have a +2 times a -7 or a -7. So again, look at your tic-tac-toe board. A positive negative is a negative, so this is a -14 minus 14. Again, instead of taking that extra step of writing our subtraction problems as addition problems and then having to multiply, we're just going to get in the habit of now using those minus signs, attach it to the number. It's -7. 2 times -7 is a -14. So let's talk about distributing numbers that have negatives. So if we just look at some basic problems here, distribute by a -1 is the same as taking the, well, let's take a look at what happens. If I do negative 1 times 200, you get negative 200. Negative times a negative is a positive, so that negative 1 times negative 200 would give me a positive 200. Negative 1 times 5 is a negative 5. Negative 1 times negative 5 is a positive 5. Negative 1 times negative 300,000 is a positive 300,000. You should be using your tic-tac-toe board to help you remember whether your answer is going to be positive or negative, or since we're using calculators, you can just punch all of these problems in. What do you notice happens? Well, if you look at the first example, I have a positive 200. My answer is negative 200. My next example, I have negative 200, and after multiplying by the negative 1, I got a positive 200. The next example, I have a positive 5 in the parentheses, but I got negative 5. Negative 5 in the parentheses, I got positive 5. Negative 300,000, I ended up getting a positive 300,000. So when all of these problems, when I multiplied by a negative or a negative 1, I actually end up getting the opposite of what was inside the parentheses. So if my number inside the parentheses was positive, I got a negative. If my number was in the inside negative, I got a positive. Again, you could use your calculator to help you remember these rules, but the key here is that you have to remember when distributing a negative 1, it's the same as taking the opposite. So you're still using the same skills from the last 2 units, but I'm teaching you new skills with those skills to help make these problems go a little bit quicker and easier so you're not relying on that calculator all the time. So let's look at the evens, 6, 8, 10, and 12. Number 6. You just have this minus sign floating on the outside of the parentheses. We can put a 1 there. Okay, so anything times 1 is itself, so we can always put a 1 there without actually changing the values. So now I'm doing negative 1 times 3. Again, you could use your tic-tac-toe board or in your calculator, type in negative 1 times 3, but using what we just learned up here about when distributing a negative 1, you take the opposite of what's on the inside of the parentheses. This negative 1 is going to change that 3 to a negative 3. Negative times a positive is a negative. Negative times a negative is a positive. This negative on the outside is going to change that minus sign on the inside to a plus. And anything times 1 is still going to give you back a 4. So my positive 3x became a negative 3x, and my minus 4 became a plus 4. Again, if that's confusing for you, just do negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. Negative 1 times a negative 4 is a positive 4. Problem number 8. I see the negative on the outside. I know that means to take the opposite of everything on the inside. So my positive 7x is going to become a negative 7x. My negative on the outside changes my minus 8 on the inside to a plus 8. Or put the 1 there and do negative 1 times 7, get negative 7, negative 1 times negative 8, and get positive 8. Problem number 10, we now have a negative on the outside with a 4. So if I multiply 4 to 5, that gives me a 20, and then my x. I multiply to 4 to 3, and that gives me a 12. But I have a negative here, and again, that negative means to take the opposite of everything that's in there. So that 5 was positive, so my 20 is going to be positive. My 3 was negative. I'm sorry, I messed that up. Let's back up a second. Negative 4 times positive 5 is a negative 20. Negative 4 times a negative 3, right, minus 3. Negative 4 times negative 3 is a positive 12. A negative times a negative is a positive. So 4 times 5 was 20, but my positive 5 became a negative, and my minus 3 became a positive. That seems really tricky. I thought explaining it the second time it would make more sense. Just use the calculator if you need to. Negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. Negative 4 times a negative 3 is a positive 12. So same thing on 12. Just do the math like you normally would. Negative 5 times 8 gives you 5, 10, 15, 20, 20, 30, 35, 40. Negative 40. Negative 5 times a negative 9 is a positive 45. Now notice, now that I'm done, I'm looking at it and going, oh, I can combine those. No, I can't. I forgot my x here. So use the calculator if you're not strong enough in those skills. Some of you are used to using the calculator, which is fine. But just keep in mind that 9 is a negative. So -5 times -9 is a positive 45. Let's practice some more. So number 14 and 16. So in problem 14, 1/3 times 9. So 1/3 times 9, you can do in the calculator, 1ABC3 times 9. You should get 3x. Try it, don't just copy it. 1/3 times a -6. Well, a positive times a negative is a negative. 1ABC3 times 6 gives you 2. Now, those of you using a calculator are going to do 1ABC3 times -6, and it's going to give you a -2, and that's what goes right next to the 3x. Number 16, 1ABC5 times 15. Try it. You should get 3x. X doesn't go into the calculator, so you need to remember to drop that down. 1ABC5 times -10 gives you a -2, so I put -2. Oh, look at that. I got the same answer twice. Okay, try these. These are all like what we just did above, right? More practice. Good. And then your Google form doesn't start until page 79. Oh, geez. This is a long one, huh? Okay. I'm spending all this time scrolling. All right, try these. 2, 4, 6, 8. So number 2. And what I would suggest is pausing the video and trying numbers 2, 4, 6, 8. And then after you're done, hit play and see if you get these right. So 6 times x is 6x. 6 times 3 is 18, and it's a positive 18. 3 times 8x is 24x. 3 times 2 is 6, and it's a positive 6. Number 6, -5 times 6 is a -30. Bring down my x. -5 times a positive 3 is a -15, so I write -15. Number 8, we could rewrite this. Multiplication's commutative, so if you're more comfortable with that 3 being in the front and not in the back, we can move that 3 to the front for multiplication. So 3 times 4 gives me 12, and then my x. 3 times a positive 1 is a positive 3, so +3. Problem number 10, 1ABC5 times 10 gives me 2x. 1ABC5 times a -15 gives me a -3, so I put -3. Oh, an extra number 10. It's your lucky day. Find the area. In order to find the area of a rectangle, from last year you should know is area equals length times width. You did this at the very end of the year during distance learning, length times width. I'm going to take my length, which is 6x minus 7, and I'm going to put it in parentheses because I want to multiply it by the width, which is 5. So I want to make sure to multiply the 6 by the 5 and the -7 by the 5. So 5 times 6 gives me 30x. 5 times 7 gives me 35, but a positive times a negative is a negative, so this is a -35. So that's key there with the distributive property with area. If you have more than one term, you need to put it in parentheses and make sure you multiply it through. Problem number 12, take what's on the outside, multiply to the inside. 4 times 5 is 20, and then my x. 4 times a -4 is a -16, so I put -16. Number 14, a negative times a positive is a negative. 4 times x is 4x. Or sneak the 1 in there. In front of the x is your coefficient. -4 times 1 is -4. -4 times a -4 is a positive 16. Notice that minus on the outside changed all your terms on the inside to the opposite sign of what it was originally. Number 16, -3 times x, which again, you can put the 1 there as the coefficient. -3 times 1 is -3, and then don't forget the x. -3 times a -5 is a positive 15. Again, notice how that negative on the outside changed your positive x to a negative and a -5 to a positive answer. So again, a little tricky when you have a coefficient, a number in front of the parentheses other than 1. So just do the multiplication as you would normally do. Number 18, there's no number in front. So I'm going to put a negative, I'm going to put a 1 with the negative. So -1 times 5 is a -5x. A -1 times 4 is a -4. So I put the -4. And then problem 20, a -6 times 2 is a -12. Don't forget the x. -6 times a -3 is a +18. Negative times a negative is a positive. Again, using that calculator to check your signs and your math. Otherwise, you should be using the tic-tac-toe board to help you do your negative times a negative or negative times a positive in order to determine what sign should be in your answer. Problem number 22, 1 ABC4 times 16 gives you 4. Don't forget the x. 1 ABC4 times a -4 gives you a -1. Again, hopefully you tried these and then you're playing to make sure that your answers match mine. The classwork page I'm going to leave for class, and then the homework page is what I'm using for the Google form. So page 79 is what you're using for the Google form questions. Okay, so hopefully you're using a calculator and you're